Welcome to Conquer Math with Comedy. In today's lesson, I will be helping you conquer a basic derivative. So, without further ado, let's get started. So it says find the derivative of the function, and number one, our function is a linear function, and the linear function is f of x equals 2x plus 8. So before we take a derivative, let me explain how you do it. So here we have to use what is called the power rule. And the power rule states that if n is a rational number, then the function f of x, x to the n, is differentiable, and the derivative of this is n. So you take this n, you'd multiply it with the so basically this is the power. So you'd multiply it in front of the x, then you'd subtract 1 from its powers. So n times x to the n minus 1 power. So here's what we're going to do for this. We're going to use this power rule, and we're going to apply this to 3 of these problems. And here what we call is the constant rule. And the constant rule is if c is a number, and if you take the derivative of, let's say for example c is 10, you take the derivative of 10, it will be 0, and this is called the constant rule. So in number 1, it's f of x equals 2x plus 8. So we would write this as f prime of x if we're taking a derivative. And so we know 2x is one term. This is one term, and this is raised to the first power. So if we would take a derivative of this, we'd multiply 1 times the 2, which is just 2. Then we subtract 1 from it, from the power. So we would get 2x to the 0 equals 2 times 1, because x to the 0 equals 1. So 2 times 1 is just 2. So we know f of x is just 2. And here, this is just a constant, so of course it's going to be 0. So the derivative of this function is f prime of x equals 2. This is the derivative. Let's move on to a power function. So in this power function, it's f of x equals x to the 4th power. As you can see, it's raised to the 4th power. So here we will apply the power rule again. We'd multiply 4 times x, so 4x, then we'd subtract 1, so it's cubed. So this is the derivative of power function. Now let's try taking a derivative of a polynomial function. So here, as you can see, you might find you recognize it's a quadratic function because it's squared. So we put f prime of x equals, so we have 2x squared plus 4x plus 4. So we'd multiply 2 to the front, 2x, we'd subtract 1, so there's just 1 here. Then here we would do the same thing like we did with number 1. We would subtract 1 from its power. Then we have 4 times x to the 0, which is 4 times 1. So it's plus 4. And this, it's just a constant, so it's 0 plus 0. So the derivative of this is f prime of x equals 2x plus 4. So as you can see, we've applied this rule. We've applied the power rule and the constant. We've applied the power rule to these 3 problems, as well as the constant rule to number 1 and number 3. So well, that's how you take a derivative, and I hope you've conquered this subject.